Newcastle United slumped to a 1-3 home loss to Nottingham Forest, where somebody that was very instrumental in their recent past came back to haunt them as Chris Wood scores a hat-trick at St. James's Park. What's up, guys? It's been your boy Izzy, and if you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing it and leaving a like to let YouTube know that you are enjoying this content. But on to Nottingham Forest's surprising victory at St. James's Park. Now, this game was a very interesting watch. One, because Newcastle had welcomed back a fair amount of players that we have seen recently not play due to injury. Now, Nottingham Forest, on the other hand, are playing just their second game after the sacking of Steve Cooper, a manager who was very much beloved within the ranks of Nottingham Forest. The only problem that I saw with Newcastle's performance is that they seem very tired. And today's game was very reflective of that. Now, Newcastle did welcome back a fair amount of players that were injured. But the thing is that they don't seem as though they are ready or match fit. And even worse, they just seem so tired after their exertions in the Champions League and some of their exertions in the League Cup and their exertions in the Premier League. So Nottingham Forest started this game very brightly. However, that was tempered by the fact that they conceded a penalty, and Newcastle looked as though they were putting themselves on the road to a victory, something that we've been very used to at St. James's Park. Alexander Isak was able to score a beautiful penalty, one where he dumbfounded Turner, and he just didn't know where to go. Now, the game kind of ebbed and flowed for a while, which is one of the things that made this an interesting watch, because Nottingham Forest gave as good as they got. And not surprisingly, Chris Wood was able to take advantage of some very good wing play from Elanga, who had been wasteful earlier. I thought that he could have laid the ball off to Chris Wood a few times and they would have gotten the goal a bit earlier. But this time he decided to make a very, very good option in giving the ball to Wood, who calmly slotted in front of an open goal. And the game was 1-1. Now, Newcastle, as we've seen most recently in some of the games that they've had at St. James's Park over the last year and a half, have been very good at home and very good at coming back into games. But there seemed to be an air of inevitability in this game when they just kept on losing the ball time and again. And despite some very good performances in midfield, I really liked Miley and the performance that they had from Bruno Guimaraes, who had some very, very good play, some nice flicks and tricks. They always seemed as though they were just so tired in this game. And not surprisingly, Chris Wood was able to have a very good solo effort and score off of it after a nice dinked effort right at the near post that was able to take away Dubravka and the defenders in one take. So Newcastle were now looking and staring down the barrel of another defeat, and one in which they would not recover because their performance was not strong after that. And Chris Wood, just only a few minutes later, was able to wrap up a beautiful hat-trick in a very good performance at St. James's Park. One of the very few people to score a hat-trick on Boxing Day. Now, an interesting tidbit that I found in this game was that the last time they faced each other on Boxing Day was right back in 1958, and Newcastle United also lost that game 3-1 at home. And sometimes I look back on history, and whenever I try to make my predictions and I try to talk about football, I always rank the fact that history always has a weird knack of repeating itself. We saw it today with Aston Villa and Manchester United, where it's been a few times that Manchester United have been able to come from 2-0 down to beat Aston Villa. And then you look at other games such as Bournemouth, who managed to beat Fulham 3-0, where Bournemouth had never won a Premier League game on Boxing Day, and they were able to defeat history. And so sometimes I just think it's very interesting to see how some of these games go. Today's game was one that I know I didn't put a preview out, but I didn't really see Nottingham Forest beating Newcastle because Newcastle United's recent home form has just been so good, and the fact that they've dispatched of some teams, even despite having a lengthy injury list and having teams and squads that were weaker than what they presented today, such as the games against against Manchester United and against Chelsea, and they were still able to come up trumps in those games. But at the end of the day, Newcastle are going to have to hit a hard reset once January comes into play. They might need to bolster their squad a bit with the fact that they don't have the likes of your Tonali and the likes of Joe Linton, and with Callum Wilson and Isaac always having some niggling injuries that are coming into some very, very crucial games, especially now that we're going into the business end of the season. The first 19 games, it's well and good being in and amongst the conversation, but if you're not able to retain it towards the last 19 games of the season, well, then you're going to have a problem. And they're facing a lot more competition now. The likes of your Aston Villa, who are right up there with Arsenal and Man City and Liverpool, and then the likes of Brighton and West Ham, Manchester United and Tottenham are always going to be in the conversation when it comes to a top four finish. So it's going to be important for Newcastle to pick up the momentum. And this might be the period in which they are just going through the motions. This might be the period when they're just not going to get as many results in their corner, and this might just be the point where they have a little bit of a drop off. But for the Geordie faithful, they are going to be hoping that there is some movement in January, and they're going to be able to try and refresh the squad somewhat, because you can clearly see that Newcastle are tired. And the fact that they're only going to have to compete with the FA Cup fixtures next to the Premier League, they should be able to try and now stabilize what we've seen from them in the last 4 or 5 games and be able to try and now push on for that top 4. And from the other side, a very good victory for Nottingham Forest. Not to forget about them, because they had been having a very tough time of it. And Nuno Espirito is going to have the same manager bounce. We've seen him be able to do it when he was at Tottenham and when he was able to do it at Wolves, albeit at Tottenham for a very short amount of time. The one thing that I would be worried about Nottingham Forest is that we don't know if they're going to be able to sustain this type of form going forward. They've been very good at home in recent past, but now they've started losing a few games at home, and it was very important for them to get a result like this on the road, because the teams that are down there are now starting to squeeze up a little bit. And when you see a team such as Luton that seem to be surviving, not based off of just fumes, because that's what some people would think they've been doing since they don't have that good of a squad, but Luton Town are now playing with the belief and feeling as though they might be able to belong in the league. And sometimes it takes a few matches for you to build up that type of confidence. And we're seeing that when you look at Bournemouth, who are now just steamrolling down each and every team that they face. And they took care of Fulham easily. They dismantled them today, and I didn't see any particular reason why Bournemouth are now going to be in a relegation battle long term. After their first 9 games, not winning any of them, they have now picked 22 points out of their last few games. And with a run of 4 consecutive victories, Nottingham Forest are going to be worried about facing teams such as your Bournemouth when it comes to trying to stave off relegation. But today is going to go a long way in telling us that Nottingham Forest have some fight in them. And despite losing somebody who commandeered their return back into the Premier League, they are going to achieve some more confidence based off of winning on a ground that very few people end up winning at. But guys, it's been your boy Izzy. Thank you for watching. I will catch you on the next review. Peace.